It was almost midnight when Ethan Cole's empire hummed beneath him, a city of glass and steel pulsing with silent power. From the penthouse floor, he could see everything, the skyline reflecting his triumph, the rain streaking down like liquid gold over the window. The world was his, and yet in that sterile quiet it felt like a cage made of light. Then, a sound. A faint, trembling cry. Too fragile for a place built on concrete and code. Ethan froze. It came again. High-pitched, human, terrified. A baby. For a moment he thought it was a glitch in his mind. But no. It came from the service hallway, the one employees used to avoid being seen. He'd never set foot there. That place wasn't for men like him. His shoes echoed as he followed the sound down the narrow corridor, the air changing, colder, denser, the scent of cleaning chemicals and metal replacing the fragrance of wealth. The deeper he went, the louder the cry grew, raw and real. He turned a corner and stopped. A young woman sat on the floor beside a cart of cleaning supplies, clutching a baby wrapped in an old towel. The child's face was flushed with fever, its tiny fists trembling. The woman's eyes widened when she saw him. The CEO, the man whose signature could erase entire departments. "I'm sorry, sir, please," she stammered, pulling the baby close. "He just got sick during my shift. I didn't know where else to go." Ethan stood there, his mind searching for the right script, the corporate response, the efficient one. But none came. Instead, there was something else. A sharp ache in his chest, like a door cracking open inside him. "What's his name?" he asked, his voice softer than he expected. "Mateo," she whispered. "He's only 6 months." The baby whimpered again. Without thinking, Ethan knelt, the billionaire kneeling on a stained tile floor. His reflection shimmered on the metal mop bucket beside him, distorted, unrecognizable. "Does he need a doctor?" "I can't," she said quickly. "If I leave, they'll fire me. I already missed hours last week." Her words landed heavier than any boardroom accusation. He realized with an unease he couldn't name that the empire he'd built had created this fear, this quiet suffering in the shadows of his success. He reached into his pocket, pulling out his phone. "Call security," he said, then paused, catching the terror in her eyes. "No, not security. A car. I'll take you myself." Rosa hesitated. "Why would you?" "Because no one should have to choose between their job and their child," he said. Outside, thunder rolled across the city as Ethan carried the crying baby through the rain-slicked street, his tailored suit darkened by the storm. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about meetings or mergers. He was just running toward something he couldn't yet understand. And in that storm, somewhere between guilt and grace, a man began to crack. Morning sunlight spilled across the glass walls of Cole Industries, but Ethan Cole barely noticed it. The world outside still shimmered with the aftermath of the storm, the kind that washed cities clean but left people stained inside. He hadn't slept. The images replayed in his mind. Rosa's trembling hands, the baby's fevered breathing, the silence of the hospital room after the doctors took the child away. He had left before dawn, unnoticed, his name nowhere on the forms. For the first time, he wanted it that way. Now, as he sat in his corner office, the hum of his empire surrounded him again, phones ringing, screens blinking, assistants whispering. Everything was running perfectly, efficient, profitable, and yet, something was off. He couldn't stop hearing it. That cry. When his assistant, Caroline, entered with the morning briefing, he barely looked up. "Schedule with the board?" she asked. "Cancel it," he said quietly. She blinked. "Sir?" "I said cancel it." Ethan turned toward the window, the city sprawling beneath him. From this height, the people looked like tiny moving dots, invisible, replaceable. He wondered how many of them had stories like Rosa's, how many hid in corners, afraid to be seen. Later that day, he went down to the lower floors, a place he had never bothered to visit in years. The janitorial office smelled faintly of bleach and warm coffee. The workers froze when they saw him. Some stood, others pretended not to notice. Ethan forced a smile that felt unnatural on his face. "I'm looking for Rosa." he said. She's not here, one of them replied. Her baby's still in the hospital. The words landed with unexpected weight. He wanted to ask more, to say something human, but the room's silence swallowed him. He turned and left. The billionaire lost in a world that didn't speak his language. That night, his penthouse felt emptier than ever. The city lights blinked below like judgmental eyes. He poured himself a drink and stared at his reflection in the dark window. A man who could buy anything, but not peace. Then his phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Mr. Cole, this is Rosa. Mateo's stable now. Thank you. But please don't tell anyone. I can't afford to lose my job. He stared at the text for a long time, his fingers hovering above the keyboard. Finally, he typed back, You won't. Rest. I'll handle it. But as he hit send, a realization settled in his chest. He didn't even know what handling it meant anymore. His company's policies, the ones he had proudly built, were designed to punish people like her. The empire he created was flawless, except for its humanity. As dawn crept over the city again, Ethan made a silent promise to himself. Tomorrow he would start changing things, quietly, carefully. But the world he ruled was not built for compassion, and it was already watching. The next morning, the boardroom was a battlefield disguised in marble and glass. 12 of the most powerful executives in the country sat around a polished table, each holding a copy of the quarterly report like a weapon. At the head sat Ethan Cole, calm, unreadable, the storm behind his eyes hidden beneath a perfect suit. Revenue's up 13%, said Marcus Layton, CFO, voice sharp as steel. Efficiency metrics have never been stronger, but about these unrecorded charitable expenses, he flipped a page. Care to explain, Ethan? The words dropped like stones. Ethan's throat tightened. He knew what Marcus was referring to. The anonymous hospital payment for Rosa's baby. A few $1,000s invisible in the ocean of their profits, but numbers didn't hide from the system he'd built. Just a personal contribution, Ethan said too quickly. Marcus leaned back, smiling thinly. Personal? Then why did it go through the corporate account? The air thickened. Around the table, eyes darted, silent calculations beginning. To them, compassion wasn't kindness. It was liability. Ethan straightened his tie. It was an oversight. I'll cover it. Marcus didn't blink. Our investors don't like oversights. The meeting ended with polite smiles and unspoken threats. As the others filed out, Caroline lingered by the door. They're suspicious, she murmured. They think you're hiding something. Ethan exhaled slowly. Maybe I am. That night, instead of heading home, he drove across the city to the hospital. The rain had stopped, but the streets still glistened under the neon haze. In the pediatric ward, he found Rosa by her baby's side. Mateo was sleeping, tiny chest rising and falling with effort, wires and monitors surrounding him. Rosa looked up, startled. You shouldn't be here. I needed to see him, Ethan said softly. How's he doing? The doctors say he'll recover. Pneumonia, they said. If we had waited another night. Her voice broke. Ethan nodded. Then it's a good thing we didn't. She hesitated, then asked, Why are you helping us? You don't even know me. He paused, searching for an answer that made sense. Because I should have noticed long before that night. People like me built a world where people like you disappear. Rosa looked away, her jaw tightening. You can't fix everything with money. I know, he said. But maybe I can start with this. He pulled a small envelope from his coat. Inside was a note. Not a check, not a contract. Just a promise. Your job is safe. No one will touch you. Tears welled in her eyes, but she shook her head. If they find out, I'll still lose everything. You don't understand how your company works. He looked at her then, really looked. Then maybe it's time I did. As he left the hospital, the city felt different. The glass towers no longer gleamed. They loomed. The empire he built now looked like a machine that devoured lives. And for the first time, Ethan Cole wasn't sure if he wanted to save it or burn it down. It started with a whisper. A rumor slipped through the digital veins of coal industries like poison, quiet at first, then viral. By noon, it had a name: the compassion scandal. Ethan Cole had been exposed. A leaked internal report claimed he'd diverted company funds to cover a hospital bill for a janitor's baby. And worse, that he'd done it secretly, outside corporate protocol. Within hours, headlines spread across financial networks. Philanthropy or publicity stunt, billionaire CEO under fire. There's Cole's compassion backfires. Shareholders question leadership. The empire he built on control was now bleeding chaos. When Ethan arrived at headquarters, security was already thicker than usual. Cameras flashed through the rain as reporters shouted his name. Inside, the board waited, eyes sharp, voices sharper. Marcus Layton stood near the head of the table, a faint smirk playing on his lips. "We trusted you," he said, sliding a folder toward Ethan. "And this is how you repay us? By using company resources for—" He paused, letting the word drip with disdain. "Charity?" Ethan's pulse hammered in his temples. That child was dying. I made a call a decent human being would make. Marcus leaned in. "You're not a human being, Ethan. You're a CEO. Act like one." The room went silent. Ethan realized then what he had always suspected. Compassion was weakness in their language, morality a liability. The empire wasn't just built on numbers. It was built on fear. By evening, the story had reached every major outlet. Stock prices began to dip. Anonymous insiders fed the media half-truths. That he was manipulating the poor for optics, that it was a PR stunt gone wrong. The more he tried to stay silent, the louder the world became. He found himself in the elevator that night, descending to the lower floors again. The world beneath his empire. Rosa was gone. Her locker was empty, her cart missing. He asked one of the other janitors where she'd gone. "They let her go this morning," the man said, not meeting his eyes. "Said she caused trouble she didn't mean to." The words hit like a punch. In a single day, Ethan had lost both his reputation and the very person he'd tried to protect. Back in his office, darkness pressed against the glass. The skyline that once looked like victory now glared like judgment. He opened his laptop. The PR team wanted a statement. The lawyers demanded silence, and the board threatened immediate corrective action. Instead, he drafted a single email to Marcus. "You want control? Take it. But you'll never understand what it's like to hear a child cry and do nothing." He didn't send it. He just stared at the blinking cursor, feeling the weight of a world built on hollow triumphs. At that moment, his phone buzzed. A message. Unknown number again. "Mr. Cole, they came for me. I had to leave. Please don't try to find us. Rosa." He read it twice, then once more. And for the first time, Ethan Cole, the man who once ruled everything, realized he had no idea where to go next. The fall of Ethan Cole didn't happen in an explosion. It happened in silence. By the end of the week, the board had voted to suspend him pending review. Investors fled. The company's logo that once glowed proudly across skyscrapers now shimmered like a ghost in the rain. Every news anchor in America had the same tone. Disbelief mixed with satisfaction. The untouchable billionaire has finally been touched. Ethan watched it all unfold from his penthouse, the city lights blurring through whiskey and exhaustion. His phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Reporters, lawyers, former allies smelling blood. He turned it off and sat in the dark, surrounded by everything he owned and nothing that mattered. He thought of Rosa, of Mateo. Somewhere out there they were surviving. Maybe she hated him now. Maybe she was right to. The next morning he walked into Coal Industries one last time. The guards didn't meet his eyes. His nameplate was already gone from the door. In its place, a note. Temporary transition office for acting CEO. Marcus Layton. Inside, Marcus was waiting. His grin was polished, professional, predatory. "Ethan," he said smoothly, "you should have stayed in your lane." Ethan looked around the office, his office, and realized how sterile it had always been. No photos, no memories, just power masquerading as purpose. "You think this is about a hospital bill?" he said quietly. Marcus chuckled. Everything's about the bottom line. Ethan turned to leave, but Marcus called out, "Oh, and Rosa Alvarez? We ran a background check. She falsified part of her employment record. Smart move staying away from her. You don't want that kind of liability following you around." He froze in the doorway. The casual cruelty in Marcus's tone burned hotter than any public humiliation. But he didn't answer. He just walked out, down the elevator, through the marble lobby, into the city. The rain had started again. For the first time, Ethan didn't call a driver. He walked, past the glowing advertisements for his own products, past the people who avoided his eyes. Eventually, his polished shoes carried him into parts of the city he'd never seen, the back streets, the underpasses, the forgotten corners where the light didn't reach. He found himself outside a 24-hour diner, small and flickering, the kind of place his world never noticed. Inside, the smell of burnt coffee and frying oil filled the air. He sat at the counter, ordered nothing, and listened. To laughter, to arguments, to the sound of real life humming beneath the noise. A man beside him, wearing a janitor's jacket from one of his own buildings, glanced over. "You look familiar," he said. Ethan smiled faintly. "I used to work in an office nearby." The man nodded, unfazed. "Tough night?" "Something like that." They sat in silence for a while, two strangers in the same quiet collapse. For the first time, Ethan didn't feel superior. He just felt human. Outside, the city breathed. Somewhere out there, Rosa was fighting to keep her baby alive. Somewhere, the empire he built was devouring itself. And Ethan Cole, billionaire, visionary, symbol of modern success, realized he had finally fallen far enough to see the ground. For the first time in years, Ethan Cole woke without an agenda. No meetings, no forecasts, no empire waiting for him to command. Just silence, and the weight of everything he'd broken. He'd traded control for conscience, and conscience had left him alone. But one thought kept cutting through the noise. Rosa. She had vanished without a trace. No forwarding address, no contact information. The only thing he had left was her last message. "Please don't try to find us." He read it again and again, until the words felt like a challenge. So he started searching. He began in the hospital where Mateo had been treated. The nurse at the front desk frowned when he asked about them. "I can't release patient information, sir." He slipped a folded paper across the counter, not money this time, but a letter. It was a note from the attending physician thanking him for funding new ventilators for the pediatric wing. The nurse's face softened. "They were discharged 2 weeks ago," she said quietly. "No address on file. The mother mentioned moving somewhere. Safer. Safer from what?" The nurse hesitated. "From people like you, I think." The words stung, not out of cruelty but truth. Ethan spent the next few days tracing every possible lead. Shelters, churches, community centers. Every conversation felt like peeling away another layer of himself. Gone was the commanding tone that once bent markets. In its place was a man asking for forgiveness in the form of questions. In a shelter on the south side, he met a volunteer named Father Jerome, a wiry man with kind eyes and an unshakable calm. "You're looking for Rosa Alvarez," the priest said after Ethan explained. "A woman with a baby boy. You're not the first to ask about her." Ethan's heart skipped. "Do you know where she is?" The priest studied him for a long moment. "Why are you looking for her, Mr. Cole?" Ethan hesitated. "Because I failed her. Because she made me see something I'd spent my whole life avoiding." Father Jerome nodded slowly. "People don't vanish because they're afraid of the world, Mr. Cole. They vanish because the world stopped seeing them." He scribbled an address on a scrap of paper. "Try here, an old church on the east side. But if you go as a man, not as a savior." That night, Ethan drove through the industrial outskirts of the city. The skyscrapers faded in the rearview mirror, replaced by rusted fences and shuttered warehouses. Finally, he found it, a crumbling stone church with a single light flickering inside. He stepped out of the car, rain dripping from his coat, heart pounding like it hadn't in years. Through the open doorway, he saw her, Rosa, kneeling beside a makeshift crib, rocking Mateo to sleep. Her hair was damp, her clothes worn, but her presence filled the room like quiet fire. She turned at the sound of his footsteps. Her eyes widened, fear, then anger, then something else. "You shouldn't be here," she said softly. "I know," he replied, "but I needed to be." She stood between him and the child, her voice trembling but strong. "Whatever you think you owe me, I don't want it. Money won't fix what's broken." Ethan nodded. "Then tell me what will." Her silence was heavier than any answer. As thunder rolled outside, the billionaire and the janitor stood facing each other, two worlds colliding in the ruins of faith. And for the first time, Ethan didn't feel like the one with power, because he finally understood. This wasn't about redemption, it was about becoming worthy of it. The church smelled of rain and candle wax. Light from a single bulb flickered against peeling walls, illuminating the edges of a world most people pretended didn't exist. Ethan Cole stood there, silent, out of place, while Rosa laid a damp cloth across Mateo's forehead. The child stirred but didn't cry. His breathing was steady now. Ethan let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. "You found us," Rosa said, her tone flat. "I wasn't trying to chase you," he replied quietly. "I just needed to know you were safe." She turned to him then, her expression sharp but tired. "Safe? You don't even know what that word means for people like me." Ethan wanted to argue, to offer help, to make the world right again. But every instinct he'd built his life on suddenly felt wrong. The silence between them grew thick with unspoken truths. After a long pause, Rosa sighed. "We come here at night. The pastor lets us stay. During the day, I clean houses. When they find out who I used to work for, they look at me like I'm poison." He swallowed hard. "That wasn't supposed to happen." "But it did," she said. "You might have lost a company, but I lost everything." Her words cut deep, but they didn't come from cruelty. They came from exhaustion. Ethan sat on one of the wooden pews, the same kind he hadn't seen since childhood. The church was quiet except for the dripping of water from a leaky roof. "Do you know what's funny?" he said softly. "I built towers so tall I forgot there was a city underneath them, a city full of people like you." Rosa turned away, wrapping her arms around herself. "We were never part of your world." "Maybe not," he admitted, "but I think I'm supposed to be part of yours now." She stared at him, searching his face for the arrogance she once despised, and saw something new: humility, the kind that hurts to wear. He helped her fix the leak that night, climbing up to the roof with an old bucket of tar and patching holes under the cold rain. It was clumsy, messy work, nothing like the precision of his former life, but when they finished, he felt something strange: peace. When he came down, Rosa was holding Mateo, rocking him gently. "You don't have to keep coming here," she said. "You've already done enough." "I know," he said. "That's why I'm coming back tomorrow." She almost smiled. Almost. Over the next few weeks, Ethan became a regular visitor. He brought food, blankets, medicine. But more than that, he listened. To Rosa. To others who drifted through the church. Janitors, factory workers, single mothers. People his world had ignored. Each story stripped another layer of illusion from him. The towers he'd built were not symbols of progress. They were monuments to blindness. One night, Father Jerome found Ethan sitting in the dark sanctuary. "You can't save everyone," the priest said gently. "I'm not trying to," Ethan replied. "I'm trying to stop destroying them." Outside, the wind howled through the broken stained glass, carrying the sounds of the city above. Sirens, traffic, ambition. The world he'd once ruled was still roaring, but down here in the quiet beneath it, Ethan Cole was finally learning how to listen. And somewhere deep inside, a dangerous thought began to form. A plan that could change everything. The city above was waking up. Trains roared, lights flickered on across the skyline, and coal industries gleamed like nothing had changed. But in the quiet below, inside a forgotten church, Ethan Cole was planning its undoing. He had spent weeks among the invisible, listening, observing, remembering. He'd seen the faces behind his prophets, the janitors who cleaned offices until dawn, The mothers who skipped meals to keep the lights on, the men who fixed elevators but couldn't afford rent in the buildings they serviced. Now he understood. His empire didn't need reform. It needed repentance. Rosa didn't believe him at first. "You want to fix the company?" she asked, folding a blanket beside Mateo's crib. "You were the company. I was the disease," Ethan said. "Now I want to be the cure." He started small, leaking his own documents, payroll records, executive bonuses, the hidden fines that punished workers for being late, anonymous emails sent to journalists under pseudonyms. Then, the bigger move, he used his remaining shares to push through emergency motions at the upcoming shareholder meeting. He proposed a complete restructuring, profit sharing for employees, debt forgiveness for laid-off workers, a foundation to fund medical care for staff families. It was a declaration of war against everything he'd built. Caroline, his former assistant, found him in a cafe downtown the night before the vote. Her expression carried both loyalty and fear. "They'll destroy you," she said. "They already did," he replied. "Now I get to choose how." The next morning, the boardroom looked like a trial chamber. Cameras outside, reporters waiting. Marcus Layton presiding like a king savoring an execution. "Ethan Cole," he began, "you no longer hold authority here. Your actions have endangered shareholder trust and public confidence. We intend to remove you permanently." Ethan stood, calm but electric. "You're right," he said. "I built this company to serve the few. I made billions selling efficiency and called it innovation. But what we really sold was indifference." Gasps filled the room. The live stream was already broadcasting his words to millions. He placed a file on the table, years of buried evidence. "These are the people you exploited. You want to fire me? Go ahead. But their stories are going with me." Marcus's mask cracked. "You'll never recover from this," he hissed. Ethan smiled faintly. "Maybe I'm not supposed to." Security escorted him out before the vote even finished. Outside, reporters swarmed, microphones flashing like gunfire. But Ethan didn't run. He looked straight into the cameras. "To every worker we ignored, I see you now. To every family we hurt, I'm sorry. Change starts here, even if it ends me." The footage exploded across the internet within hours. Stock prices plunged. Protests erupted outside Cole Industries. For the first time, employees weren't afraid to speak. That night, Ethan returned to the church, drenched in rain and exhaustion. Rosa met him at the door. "What did you do?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I broke it," he said simply. "The machine. It's over." She studied him for a long moment. Then, almost in a whisper, "You might have just saved more people than you know." Ethan looked at Mateo sleeping nearby, the tiny heartbeat that had started it all, and felt something he hadn't in years. Not pride, not power, peace. But somewhere deep in the city, the old machine was still grinding, and its hunger wasn't gone yet. Winter came quietly that year. The city that once glittered for Ethan Cole now looked softer under a gray sky. The towers still standing, but their shine dulled. Cole Industries was no longer his. The empire had been carved apart by lawsuits, regulators, and shareholders eager to erase his name from memory. And yet, for the first time in his life, Ethan felt free. He'd spent months working alongside Father Jerome, rebuilding the church and converting the basement into a community center. Rosa worked there too, organizing food drives and literacy classes for employees displaced after the scandal. Mateo had learned to walk, his tiny steps echoing through the old hallways like blessings. But Ethan still carried ghosts. At night, he dreamed of glass corridors and ringing phones. Sometimes he woke to the sound of a baby crying, or thought he did, until one evening, he really heard it again. He was walking home through the cold, his breath a thin fog in the air, when the cry reached him, faint, sharp, desperate. He froze. The sound came from across the street, near the alley beside the new shelter his foundation had helped build. For a second, he wasn't in the present. He was back in that marble corridor, the night it all began, the same helpless cry, the same rush of fear and instinct colliding. He ran. The alley was dim, lit only by a flickering streetlight. A young woman was crouched beside a dumpster, clutching a baby wrapped in a torn blanket. Her hands were shaking. "Please," she gasped. "He's sick. I don't know what to do." Ethan's breath caught. "It's okay," he said, kneeling beside her. "You're safe now." The words came naturally this time. No hesitation, no calculation. He took off his coat, wrapped it around the child, and shouted for help. Volunteers from the shelter rushed out moments later. When the paramedics arrived, the baby was still breathing, weak but alive. Ethan stood back, his heart pounding as the ambulance pulled away. Rosa had seen the commotion from down the block. She approached slowly, her expression unreadable. "You heard it again, didn't you?" He nodded, his eyes glistening in the streetlight. It felt like the same cry. She smiled gently. Maybe it was. Maybe the world keeps sending it until someone listens. They stood there together in the cold, the city buzzing faintly around them. The shelter's sign flickered above their heads. Cole Foundation. For those still fighting. For the first time, Ethan realized he wasn't haunted by that first cry anymore. He was guided by it. Later that night, he returned to the church. Mateo was asleep, his small hand curled around a toy truck Ethan had given him. Ethan sat in one of the back pews, listening to the faint hum of the city beyond the stained glass. The sound of crying had once shattered his world. Now it reminded him why he was still in it. He closed his eyes and whispered, "Thank you." Outside, the city exhaled, and somewhere a life had been saved, because one man had finally learned to hear. The city woke under a pale dawn, streaks of pink light slipping between towers that no longer felt untouchable. Down in the East District, where the air smelled of bread and rain, the church stood renewed, rebuilt stone by stone, window by window. Inside, laughter filled the halls. Volunteers moved between tables serving breakfast to families. Children played with donated toys. The once forgotten place had become a refuge, a heartbeat beneath the noise of progress. At the center of it all stood Ethan Cole, not in a suit, not behind a podium, just in rolled-up sleeves handing out bowls of soup. The billionaire was gone. What remained was something quieter, more real. Rosa walked up beside him, carrying Mateo on her hip. The boy reached out, touching Ethan's hair with a curious smile. Ethan chuckled softly. "He's getting heavier," he said. "That means he's healthy," Rosa replied. They stood together, watching the room buzz with life. "You know," she said, "you could have disappeared. Started over somewhere far away." "I did start over," he said, looking around. "Right here." Outside, the sound of traffic rolled past. The city never stopped, but it no longer swallowed everything. The Cole Foundation now ran clinics, shelters, and scholarship programs across the state. It wasn't charity, it was restitution. Every project bore the names of workers, janitors, and families who had once gone unseen. Later that afternoon, Father Jerome gathered everyone in the chapel for a small ceremony. "A year ago," he began, "this building was crumbling, and so were many of us. Today, it stands because people who were once strangers decided to build together. That is redemption, not forgetting who we were, but becoming who we could be." He turned to Ethan. "Would you like to say something?" Ethan hesitated, then stepped forward. His voice was steady, warm. "I spent my life trying to be remembered," he said. "I thought legacy meant building something that would outlast me. But legacy isn't about what you build. It's about who you lift. Rosa and Mateo taught me that one cry can wake a sleeping soul. It woke mine." He looked out at the crowd, workers, mothers, children, all watching him not as a figure of wealth, but as one of them. "I can't change the man I was," he said softly, "but I can keep becoming the man that baby needed me to be." Applause rose, not thunderous but sincere. It filled the old chapel with warmth. As the sun dipped low, painting the stained glass in gold and crimson, Ethan sat on the church steps. Mateo toddled over and climbed into his lap. Together they watched the streetlights flicker to life, the same city but somehow different. Rosa joined them, her voice quiet. "Do you ever miss it?" "The towers?" he asked. He smiled faintly. "Sometimes. But I used to look down from them and see nothing. Now I look up and see everything. The bells began to ring, slow, steady, like a heartbeat. In their echo, Ethan Cole, once a man defined by what he owned, finally understood what it meant to belong. He lifted Mateo in his arms, the boys' laughter rising into the twilight. Around them, the city pulsed with light and life. And in that glow, for the first time, Ethan felt something richer than fortune, stronger than redemption. He felt home.